we have finally arrived to the top 10 heavy metal songs of all time, according to Rolling Stone magazine. Most of the songs remaining on this list are fantastic, Hall of Fame level. But which one will end up being number one? And will I agree with it? Stay tuned. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to the top 10 heavy metal songs of all time, according to Rolling Stone magazine. Now, we've been through 90, we've had controversies, we've had, talk of great songs, fantastic artists, but here we are, the Big 10. And as I said in the teaser, there's going to be a lot of really great songs to discuss tonight. The one thing I will say is I'm going to go through the songs a little bit quicker than usual, because at the end of this video, I'm going to give my final kind of critique of the entire Rolling Stone list. So without further ado, let's get going. By the way, if you like this content, please subscribe. Give it a thumbs up if you think I did a great job on this list. If you think songs should have been on this list, you missed your chance to get into the honorable mention category last week, but you can still put your comments down below. Songs or artists you think might have been snubbed off both the Rolling Stone list and my list. So let your voice be heard. Want to know what you guys think. But anyway, without further ado, the final 10 of the greatest songs of all time. All right, coming in at number 10 on the all-time heavy metal song list. One of my favorite bands of all time, Iron Maiden, with one of their trademark songs, a classic song from the 1982 Number of the Beast album, the iconic Run to the Hills. Now, as I mentioned in our last video, this is my favorite edition of Iron Maiden. It was only there for one beautiful album, but what an album it was. I would put 1982's Number of the Beast album amongst the all-time greatest heavy metal albums of all time. I remember distinctly hearing from this album. I was driving up to Albuquerque, New Mexico. They had a fantastic, think about this, it was 1982. They were playing Iron Maiden on the radio. What a great radio station that was. But heading up there, the disc jockey comes out and says the new song from Iron Maiden, and all of a sudden, now I had the very first Iron Maiden album. I don't think I had Killers at that point, but I was familiar with the Paul Di'Anno version of the band, and so all of a sudden they played the Number of the Beast, and you have that real creepy Vincent Price intro, and then breaks into just Bruce Dickinson is not Paul Di'Anno. I love Paul Di'Anno, love Bruce Dickinson, but they're two totally different singers. And all of a sudden I'm like, what in the world's happening to Maiden? Because back then, no internet, we didn't have any idea what was going on. So you'd hear an artist and all of a sudden they'd have a new lead singer. It was always a surprise. So remember rushing home, finding this album, getting this album, and playing it to death. Run to the Hills then is the very first time I actually saw Iron Maiden, because they had a video on MTV, and there's Bruce Dickinson with the spiked leather gauntlets on his forearm, and I was like, this is the greatest band ever. And here we are, 40 years later, still one of the greatest heavy metal bands of all time. Had a couple of cool experiences recently. Went to go see Amon Amarth in concert. Of course, Amon Amarth, one of my favorite newer bands. They're also, I think, on episode 3 of this list. And right before the band comes out, the lights go out, and all of a sudden they start blaring out Run to the Hills. And, I would say I was one of the older people there. There's a few people my age still going to heavy metal shows, but it was a much younger crowd, much more my kids' age. And to see generations of metal people just singing along to Run to the Hills. Everybody knew the lyrics. Everybody was stoked. Being in a real cool sing-along really shows how Again, 4 decades of heavy metal coming together. People in their 20s, people like me, won't reveal my age here, but let's just say the first digit starts with a 5. Yeah, it was just fantastic. And probably people older than me just jamming out to the song. It's a really cool experience. I really like that. And again, it just shows that Iron Maiden's a band that spans the test of time across all generations. They are beloved, and hopefully we'll have them for many more years to come. Coming in at number 10, Iron Maiden, Run to the Hills. All right, coming in at number 9. You know, one of my favorite artists ever, Dio, with the title track to his 1983 debut album, Holy Diver. Now, I got to be honest, I have sat here and gone back and forth on this song a ton of times. This is a fantastic song. Again, we talked about this on Rainbow in the Dark. I'll say this also about Holy Diver. The lyrics of this song are fantastic. I really love the way Ronnie James Dio says, when you jump on the tiger, you can feel his heart, but you still know he's mean. Some light can never be seen. Love that line, love that song. However, I'm going to be just nitpicky because, I mean, these are all great songs. These are all like Hall of Fame level songs. And so allow me to just do a personal preference here, because I'm going to replace this song with the title track to the 1984 Last in Line album. Again, I just prefer this song just a little bit to Holy Diver. Holy Diver's iconic. I think Holy Diver, if you talk to most Dio fans, they'll tell you, oh yeah, Holy Diver is my favorite song. I have quite a few songs that I like more than Holy Diver, and one of those is Last in Line. We talked about this with Iron Maiden on the last pick. I remember hearing, hey, Dio's got a new album coming out. They're playing the new single on the radio. I was in Phoenix at this point, and I remember I was just pulling into my apartment complex, and the opening notes came out, and right away I was like, that's got to be the new Dio song. Vivian Campbell was the guitarist, of course, on the original first 3 Dio albums, has that iconic tone. I was just sitting in my car, and then Dio comes in, real soft at first, and then that iconic, we are coming home, and then he just belts out home. The song kicks in. I love those type of arrangements. I love this song. So number 9, Dio, The Last in Line. All right, coming in at number 8 on the Rolling Stone Top Heavy Metal Songs, Slayer, Raining Blood. Now, we all know that I'm not keeping Slayer on the list. This is no big surprise, and that I've replaced them with Five Finger Death Punch. What is surprising, perhaps, is the song I'm going to choose from the 2007 The Way of the Fist, The Bleeding. Now, I was kind of talking to a few of listeners of this, and most of them thought that I would select Lift Me Up, the song they did, of course, with one of my other favorite singers of all time, Rob Halford. And I came so very close to picking that song. But to me, The Bleeding is the perfect Five Finger Death Punch song. It's not quite as groovy as some of their other songs. It's not quite as their usual pissed off selves. But it does show a different side to Five Finger Death Punch, and a side that they didn't really show a lot after this. The emotion in this song is just unparalleled. And so when he's really belting out the vocals on this, you can just feel the pain and the anguish in his voice. I love this song. It had to be on this list. Shout out to Ivan Moody, the lead singer of Five Finger Death Punch, who I recently believe said they're hanging up their boots. He is from the Denver area, so kudos. I had to put him on the list. He's a local boy. And again, love the groove of Five Finger Death Punch, but also love the vocals, love the emotion of this song. Had to be in here. So at number 8, Five Finger Death Punch, The Bleeding. All right, coming in at number 7 on the Rolling Stone Top 100 Heavy Metal Songs of All Time, Black Sabbath, Iron Man. Now, if you remember about 3 episodes back, there are 2 distinct Sabbath eras that we've been talking about. One is, of course, the iconic Ozzy Sabbath. The other is the more recent Dio Sabbath. Both are great. I fall into the Dio Sabbath camp, but in order to do an olive branch, we agreed to do an Ozzy Sabbath and a Dio Sabbath song. So for the Ozzy Sabbath song, I think we're going to stick right here off the 1970 Paranoid album, Iron Man. I love this song. This is an iconic song. And it really is one of the iconic Ozzy songs because, of course, his legendary intro, I Am Iron Man, is probably the most famous. Everyone's heard it. Everyone knows it. It is a absolute Ozzy staple. The song itself is really great in that it's very heavy, but it's very ahead of its time. For those of you who have never heard the song or have never stopped to listen to the lyrics, it's about a secret weapon a man used in the war turned into this metal monster. But then after the war ends, the people that built Iron Man, the people that made Iron Man, start to get a little nervous, like we've made this ultimate weapon and now we don't need him anymore, and they try to dispose of him. Of course, it doesn't turn out well for the scientists. Iron Man gets his revenge. It's a great science fiction story told in a fantastic song. Now for the Dio Sabbath song, I'm going to go with the 1981 title track to the fantastic album, Mob Rules, but I'm going to do a little bit of a twist on it, much like I did with Judas Priest earlier in the list, in that there's a cool intro in this song called E5150. So my selection for the Dio Sabbath is going to be E5150, The Mob Rules. The Mob Rules is kind of a unique song for Sabbath. Sabbath, as you know, is known as maybe doom metal, even at times stoner metal. It tends to be a little slower, a little heavier. Of course, that's where Tony Iommi gets those thundering riffs from. This is a much faster song and a kind of a departure for Iommi. We talk about a little bit of this in earlier episodes where the stuff Tony Iommi is doing in these albums is fantastic, and again really breaks out of his normal riffs and really cranks it up on a couple of songs. Die Young is another one where he just kind of lets it go. 2 of the faster songs in the Sabbath catalog. I love the Mob Rules. This was also on the Heavy Metal soundtrack. If you've ever listened to that soundtrack, they have a version of the Mob Rules, but I will say it is not the same version as what appears on the album. So if you've only heard the Heavy Metal soundtrack version of the Mob Rules, you're missing out. Go to the Mob Rules, put on E5150 and Mob Rules, listen to them back to back. You'll be glad you did. So again, coming in at number 7, Black Sabbath Ozzy with Iron Man, and Black Sabbath Dio with E5150, The Mob Rules. Speaking of Black Sabbath, coming in at number 6, the great Ozzy Osbourne, Crazy Train. Now, if you go back to, I believe, around episode 5 or 6, we talk about Ozzy being previously on the list, and we picked the song Mr. Crowley. Now, if I were to make my own list, Crazy Train would probably go about the middle of the list. Mr. Crowley would be up here. I think Mr. Crowley is the superior song. But since this is Rolling Stone's list, they picked Crazy Train here. I put Mr. Crowley in the open slot. And I don't mind putting Crazy Train here. After all, it is Ozzy's signature song. It is a song that if you've been to a football game or a hockey game or any sort of arena event, you've probably heard this song. A great song for like kickoffs. It leads with the iconic Ozzy. We talked about, him yelling out, "I am Iron Man." How about "All Aboard"? The Crazy Train, fantastic stuff. Of course, this was how the world was introduced to the fantastic guitarist Randy Rhoads. Rest in peace, Randy. The lyrics of this song are tremendous. You have to understand, in 1980, we were still in the Cold War era, and Ozzy does a wonderful protest of that era. The media sells it, and you live the role. Still true today. Don't trust the media. There's my political statement for the day. Ozzy had, Ozzy was an interesting fellow because there's a lot of controversy about just how much of the lyrics he wrote. We all know that during the Black Sabbath era, Geezer Butler wrote a lot for the band. And there's a lot of people who talk about different members of the band writing these songs as well. But whoever wrote it, it is a fantastic song, great political commentary, and of course, Randy's guitar solo, just one of the all-time best. So, coming in at number 6, Ozzy Osbourne, "All Aboard the Crazy Train." Coming in at number 5, Black Sabbath, "War Pigs." Now, again, we're going to, for the Ozzy Black Sabbath selection, we're going to keep this one. This is a great anti-war song. This is a great, legendary song. We talk a lot about the fact that this song also came off the 1970 Paranoid album. Well, the 1970 Paranoid album was originally supposed to be titled War Pigs. This was originally scheduled to be the title track. That's how highly they thought of it. This is one of their biggest hits. Love this song. Generals gathered in their masses. Just an iconic beginning to the song. Love this song to death. For the Dio Sabbath selection, we're going to go to the 1980 Heaven and Hell album. And actually, we're going to select my favorite Dio Sabbath selection, "Children of the Sea." What makes this song great is one of my favorite Dio tropes. If you listened to my selection a few selections ago with Last in Line, is the fact that Dio can start off very slow and then hit like a heavy crescendo. "Children of the Sea" starts out very light, very soft, and then the hammer comes down. It's not a fast song. It is a slower song, more in the doom metal Sabbath tradition, but it's suffocatingly heavy. It's a fantastic song. I love "Children of the Sea." This is the song that made me fall in love with Black Sabbath. Those songs that you hear for the first time and you remember it the rest of your life, and you're going to be a heavy metal fan forever. This song is it for me with Sabbath. It was kind of funny because at the time, I didn't really know that Ozzy had been in Black Sabbath. This was my intro to Black Sabbath, was Heaven and Hell. And, I think I heard Ozzy's solo stuff first. Blizzard of Oz, great album. Really loved Ozzy and knew him as a solo artist with, of course, Randy Rhoads. And then to hear this, I love Ozzy. I love Dio. Both are being represented here at number 5, Black Sabbath, "War Pigs" for the Ozzy era, and "Children of the Sea" for the Dio era. All right, coming in at number 4, not Black Sabbath or a former lead singer of Black Sabbath. So we're mixing it up a little bit. Thank you, Rolling Stone. Coming in at number 4, the metal gods themselves, Judas Priest, and the song Breaking the Law. Now, Breaking the Law is an iconic song. It is a great song. If you see Judas Priest in concert, this is probably going to be the encore. And I love this song. You know, I've heard it 10 million times and I still don't get tired of it. It is great. However, I'm going to replace it from the 1982 Screaming for Vengeance, the opener, Hellion / Electric Eye. Now, granted, I'm a sucker for a good musical prelude and then belting out a great song. But this also is the greatest concert opener that I've ever been witness to. So back in 1982, I snuck out of the house and went to El Paso, Texas for a Judas Priest concert, and it changed my life. Like, if there's that moment where you realize I will love metal for the rest of my life, this was that moment, because Rob Halford in full leather brigade, the band starts in with that iconic musical intro, and then you hear Halford start belting out the lines from Electric Eye. He's high above the crowd. He comes down, bullwhip on his hip. It was magical. I fell in love with Judas Priest that night, and I cemented my love of heavy metal that night. What a great album opener, and what a great song. Screaming for Vengeance, very underrated. A lot of people, including Rolling Stone, really look at that British Steel album. If you notice, Rolling Stone picked both the songs off of that iconic British Steel album, the British Steel album that sits on my wall. But Screaming for Vengeance is hard to beat, and this opener just sets the tone for the whole album. It's like, buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be fast. It's going to be intense. I love this album, and again, I'll go on record, maybe the best opening song for an album or concert of all time. Coming in at number 4, Judas Priest, the Hellion, Electric Eye. You've probably heard that expression. Better late than never. Well, coming in at number 3, Motorhead, Ace of Spades. Whew, Motorhead had to be on this list. Motorhead's one of the greatest heavy metal bands of all time. And if Rolling Stone hadn't picked them, I would have. I love Motorhead. Now, many people put Motorhead in the new wave of British heavy metal. I do not. I think Motorhead came out just a little bit before and had enough of a different sound, very different sound from a lot of metal bands that came out of the new wave of British heavy metal. Much more kind of a blend of like punk rock and heavy metal. Motorhead really has a very unique sound. So if you put them into that the new wave, cool. I do not. But either way, this album and this band inspired so many that came from behind them. Again, they're on my list, on my wall right behind me, and the band right next to them, Metallica, took a lot of inspiration from Motorhead as well. The only thing, again, with the Rolling Stone list that I have great consternation with is they're on here once. See, that's kind of the problem with Motorhead. They're kind of a trendy pick these days. And everybody who wants to sound trendy puts Motorhead on the list, but they don't really know Motorhead, or they just give it, So they put Motorhead way up here at number 3, and that's good. I love Ace of Spades. Sure, top 10 song. But this is the only song on the list. It's like, there's no Overkill. There's no Killed by Death. There's no We Are the Road Crew. There's so many great songs from Motorhead. They need to be on this list more than once. In particular, not having Overkill on this list is hideous. Shame on you, Rolling Stone. It's kind of like not having Cemetery Gates from Pantera. Like, you can't have a list that has anything to do with heavy metal and not have Overkill on it. And I know Killed by Death is a little cheesy, but God bless Lemmy. That's part of his charm. Um, you know, one last thing. We do a lot of rest in peace on here. You start to realize when you start talking about music, 40, 50 years old, we've lost a lot of great rock and rollers over the years. Unfortunately, the original Motorhead lineup has all passed on. So rest in peace, of course, the great Lemmy, the fast Eddie Clarke with his blazing guitar, and you gotta say rest in peace, Filthy Phil, who Phil Taylor was one of the most intense, crazy drummers of all time. I love the original lineup. Ace of Spades, Overkill, probably recognizes their two best albums, but everything through this stretch is fantastic. And if you want to really listen to one of the best live albums of all time, No Sleep to Hammersmith, the original, chef's kiss. It really brings the energy of Motorhead. It brings a little bit of Lemmy's humor into it, really livens things up, and really makes you appreciate the band even more than what you get in the studio version. So I could have gone with Overkill. I could have gone with Killed by Death, but I'm not going to complain about Ace of Spades. It's fantastic. And I'm glad the Rolling Stones came to their senses and at least put them on here once. At number 3, Motorhead, Ace of Spades. All right, coming in at number 2. Boy, for what the Rolling Stone is trying to do on this list, I believe this this song should be number 1. But they brought it in at number 2, Metallica, Master of Puppets. Listen, everybody, we're sitting here in the year 2023, and Metallica is the biggest heavy metal band in the world. And they really haven't put out anything of note, anything that's really been top-notch for 30 years. That's how big Metallica is. The staying power of this band is amazing. Especially when you consider at the time this was out, this was very much an underground band. They were getting no radio. They were getting no MTV. They didn't even have a video. For them to be this big for this long is just amazing to someone who witnessed that in real time. This seemed like one of those bands that was going to be great and never get the recognition. And then boom, one day, biggest band on the planet. And then they've retained that off and on for the last 40 years. Today, Metallica can go anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and sell out a stadium. It's ridiculous. Fantastic band. Anyway, just a little trivia about this, just a little something about Master of Puppets. This song has recently got back on the Billboard charts because of the TV show Stranger Things. If you're not a fan of Stranger Things or don't know what I'm talking about, there is the heavy metal outcast Eddie Munson, who goes into the reverse world and plays the Master of Puppets solo to kill off these crazy flying bat things. If you haven't seen this scene, go check it out, because not only has it, sparked a revitalized interest in this song, it's really a cool version of it too. So, and I know the band members of Metallica were very impressed with how it was presented in the show. So, it would not be my number 1, personally. But again, when you talk about what the Rolling Stone list kind of is going for here as far as influential, popular songs, probably should be their number 1. Of course, it tackles the sensitive and timely topic of drug abuse. Stay away from drugs. Anyway, coming in at number 2, the greatest heavy metal band in the world, Metallica, Master of Puppets. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for. The number 1 song in the top 100 heavy metal song countdown, according to Rolling Stone magazine, is Black Sabbath. From the album Black Sabbath, From the artist, of course, Black Sabbath. This is the very first heavy metal song. And I think it's a clever way to top the list. As opposed to trying to really sit around and say, this is the greatest heavy metal song, why not pick the very first heavy metal song? Because this is it. There are some people that will debate this fact, but they are wrong. This is the birth of heavy metal. A great song. I love this song so very much. I'm going to keep it as the number one song for the Ozzy Black Sabbath pick. And the reason why is this song has maybe my favorite Tony Iommi riff, in that it starts out slow and creepy and very, this is really, those first few albums, Sabbath is really doomy, and it's haunting and it's slow, and then all of a sudden Tony Iommi just kicks into this tremendous riff. In fact, it is my favorite Tony Iommi riff until 1981, where the Dio Sabbath selection has the number one heavy metal song of all time, Falling Off the Edge of the World. Ironically, Falling Off the Edge of the World is very similar to Black Sabbath in that, again, it starts out very slow, very doomy, very creepy, and then kicks into one of the greatest riffs of all time. Frankly, I don't understand why this song doesn't get more accolades. It is fantastic. It is by far the song that I listen to most from the Black Sabbath era, and it's so similar. I love the riff. Again, we talked about the Dio trope of starting off slow and then hitting the hammer down 2 or 3 minutes into the song. Ironically enough, though, Black Sabbath does the same thing. Now, on the playlist, you'll see, if you go to the Spotify playlist, I did do something a little bit different. My favorite version of Black Sabbath, the song, is off the 1982 Live Evil album. Now, I know what you're going to say. Wait a minute, that's Dio singing it. Yes, it is. But it's the Tony Iommi riff that really stands out on that song, on that track, on that live version. Tony Iommi, we know, was having a little bit of the white powder at that time. He kicks a little extra in for this song. I love this riff. I always liked this song, but it was the Live Evil album that finally turned me around to realizing, wow, this is my favorite riff, with the exception of the other number one song we have from the Dio era. So from the Ozzy era, the very first heavy metal song of all time, Black Sabbath, and from the Dio era, the number one song of all time, Falling Off the Edge of the World. All right, that wraps up the series. I wanted to close us with making 3 observations about common critiques from this Rolling Stone list and give you a preview of what our next series is going to be all about. So the 3 common critiques I have, or critics of this list, are that number 1, it tends to be a little bit older skewing. I agree with that criticism. There is a lot of really good heavy metal music post-2000. The Rolling Stone list really focuses most of its selections in the 80s and 90s, with just a few songs that barely cross over into the 2000s, and even those are very few and far between. I think they probably have more songs in 1970 and below than they have a post-2000. I think it's odd that they left off a lot of really good modern music. Five Finger Death Punch, Disturbed, Hailstorm, Slipknot, other big bands, Stone Sour. There's a lot of really good, Motionless in White. The list goes on and on. There's a lot of good heavy metal music. So if you're an old guy like me who's been listening to music and kind of got stuck in the 80s and 90s and never moved on, I'll go through this list and find some of those great 2000 artists and give them a listen. Really good stuff out there. And it was a shame that it wasn't represented on this list. So that I agree with that um, critique. The second critique I hear from a lot of people about this list is, the fact that they have multiple songs from different artists. Now, here I'm going to stick up for the Rolling Stone. I think if you're doing a top 100 artists of all time, then yeah, of course, you're only going to have one artist per. And you could make a different type of list where you state that you're going to select one song from each band. You could do a list like that as a different type of thing. But if you're really talking about the top 100 heavy metal songs of all time, of course it's going to have multiple Metallica songs. Of course it's going to have multiple Iron Maiden songs. Of course it's going to have multiple Judas Priest songs. I don't disagree with that. In fact, I applaud that. I think most of your big heavy metal bands should be on this list more than once. And but that leads me to the third critique of this. And this is one that I also agree with the critics of Rolling Stone. It's okay to have multiple songs by bands in here, but 4 Black Sabbath songs in the top 12 is a little overdoing it. One of the things, and this goes back to our number one critique of this, is that it skews a little old. If you put 4 songs in 1970 on this list, what you're saying is heavy metal peaked with Black Sabbath in 1970. And I couldn't disagree with that assumption more. Heavy metal has gotten better and better and better. Yeah, there might be eras of the music. I'm very critical of the nu metal era, for instance. So it ebbs and flows, but it didn't just happen in 1970 and it's never been the same since. That's ridiculous. We talked about just, Judas Priest really bringing heavy metal into a more modern movement. And of course, we have thrash metal that came across with Metallica and Megadeth and others. 4 Black Sabbath songs in the top 12 is very clumpy, very top heavy, and it's just factually, I don't believe, true. Now, again, if you're talking about influential songs, maybe, because they were the very first, so they influenced more than, say, someone who's just put out something in the last 5 years. How much influence could it have? It's been 5 years, right? As opposed to something that's stood the test of time for 50 years. But that's not what this list is. This list is the greatest. And in that respect, I don't believe Black Sabbath in the 70s was the cat's pajamas, if you will. I think there's been a lot of better heavy metal that's come since then, as you could probably tell by my list. So 2 critiques I agree with. One I think is a little bit unfair. But overall, I think the Rolling Stone list is okay. All lists are going to be controversial. It was a weird list in that, the first 50 or 60 songs are it seemed like kind of almost randomly picked. You didn't have any duplicates, which is why I think a lot of people started to think, well, there's not going to be any duplicates on this album. And then the last 40, it's just, multiple songs galore. We talked about some of the big snubs, on our honorable mention album, but our honorable mention show. But there were a few bands, again, that got snubbed with like one selection when they should have had multiple ones. We just got through talking about Motorhead, Pantera, again, another example of that. Slipknot, my gosh, they had one Slipknot song in the top 100. They had one System of a Down song in the top 100. So they were clumpy in places, but they weren't, I don't know. Overall, it's an okay list, but I think I did better. And if you think I did better, again, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel because there's going to be more to come. Speaking of which, we're finished with the top 100, folks. So we're going to start a new series next week where we're going to take a look at the Grammy Awards. Over the past 50 years, the Grammy Awards have, either ignored heavy metal or largely got heavy metal wrong. So we're going to go back in. We're going to take the time machine, travel back in time, all the way back throughout the years and fix it so that it recognizes good heavy metal. But also, one of the things, let's face it, even if heavy metal didn't exist, the Grammy Award selections are terrible. For an organization that honors music, it seems like they don't know that much about music or have good taste in music. So we're gonna go through. It's gonna be a little bit perhaps dated at first because I want to get a running start into the birth of heavy metal. So we're gonna start in the '60s, the late '60s. Our first series is going to be the year 1967, and we're going to go all the way to 2023. And by the time we get there, probably 2024. So I know going back to the '60s might be a little bit old for everybody, but hang in there. We're gonna make a point here, and we're gonna get a good running start. And as the years grow, so will the influence and the power of heavy metal. So I look forward to seeing you in our new series, Fixing the Grammys, coming up next week. Same time, same bat channel. We'll still be here on Tuesday nights. So see you next week. In the meantime, this has been the top 100 heavy metal songs of all time. This is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.